Good morning, and welcome to this special edition of the Informed American podcast. I'm your host, Shelley Meyer, and today I'm going to be discussing a Supreme Court decision that will leave millions of Americans hungry, continue to make them hungry. In a move that shocked legal scholars, nonprofit advocates, and even several state governments, the United States Supreme Court, now mostly Trump appointed, ruled that the president is not required to use discretionary funds to continue SNAP benefits during the government shutdown. That means this: the money does exist, the hunger does exist, the need does exist, but the federal government is choosing not to feed millions of Americans. So let me break down what this ruling means, who it affects, and why this is one of the most consequential cases in modern history. What exactly did the Supreme Court decide? Well, a coalition of states, hunger prevention groups, and legal advocates filed an emergency request demanding that the White House release the USDA contingency fund to keep food assistance going during the shutdown. A lower federal court granted that request, but the Trump administration appealed, and the case reached the Supreme Court. By a majority vote, Trump 6 to the Democratic 3, the court ruled that the president has discretion in whether contingency funds are used during a shutdown, even when failing to do so harms the public. In plain English, the money's there. That's what it's used for. The administration can use it, but the Supreme Court says they don't have to. No law forces the government to prevent citizens from going hungry. The ruling was narrow in language, but massive in impact. So, who is losing food assistance? Well, more than 40 million Americans rely on SNAP. That includes children, senior citizens on fixed incomes, disabled Americans, veterans, and full-time and part-time workers whose wages don't cover food and rent. These are not lazy people. They are cashiers, home care workers, janitors, waitresses, single parents, retired Americans, and disabled veterans. They are the backbone of this economy. And without SNAP benefits, families can't get groceries. Food banks will be overwhelmed, and they already are. Children will show up hungry to school. Malnutrition will rise, and grocery prices will rise. The economy suffers as billions disappear from grocery stores and local businesses. This decision turns a budget fight into a public health crisis. This should not be happening. So why is this decision so unprecedented? Well, historically, presidents in both parties, Democrat and Republican, protected SNAP during shutdowns by tapping emergency reserves. It has never been used as leverage in a budget standoff. But this time, the administration argued the contingency fund is for emergencies, not hungry. What does the Trump administration think that this crisis is? It's an emergency. Distributing it would remove negotiation power in Congress, and states should handle their own food needs. So let's be clear, hunger is an emergency. Children not eating is not a negotiation strategy. Food banks cannot replace a federal program serving 40 million people. By siding with the administration, the court didn't just interpret law, it normalized hunger as a political tool. So how is this going to affect real Americans? Well, without SNAP benefits, millions of households will skip meals, water down baby formula, choose between food and medication, rely on food banks already near collapse. For children, hunger causes developmental delays, behavioral problems, and lifelong health consequences. For seniors, it increases hospitalization and death rates. For veterans, which Republicans claim to care about, it worsens PTSD, depression, and health instability. And for disabled Americans, it creates medical emergency and dietary crises. We like to say America supports its troops, its children, its elderly. This ruling proves we support them only when politically convenient. So here's the larger message of the ruling. This wasn't just about SNAP. This was a legal precedent. The court effectively ruled the president can withhold basic survival needs if Congress is gridlocked. Congress is mostly Republican. The federal government is not required to act compassionately. Emergency funds meant for crisis do not have to be used in that crisis. Legal scholars are warning that this opens the door to withholding disaster relief, which Trump has said he would do in Democrat states, withholding housing funds, withholding health care funds, and that's what the Republicans are trying to do. The shutdown is a part of that. And this opens the door to withholding veteran benefits. If hunger is optional, what's next? So how does the rest of the world see this? Well, international media outlets are asking, how can the wealthiest nation on earth starve its own citizens? That's a fair question. Most developed countries treat food as a right, not a bargaining chip. In America, right now, food is a political tool. And in this shutdown, the government is choosing not to feed children, not to feed seniors, not to feed veterans, not to feed working families, because politicians prefer leverage over lives. So what happens next? Well, unless Congress passes a budget or a temporary funding bill, SNAP will remain unfunded. Food banks will become overwhelmed, and they already are. Grocery stores in low-income areas may close, and hunger will become a widespread within days. Not weeks, not months, days. Some governors are trying to use state emergency funds to keep feeding residents. Good for them. But most states don't have the money to replace a federal program of this size. This problem will not fix itself. My final thoughts. The government shutdown is supposed to be an inconvenience. This one has become cruelty. A civilized country cannot knowingly starve millions of its citizens and call itself moral, stable, or strong. And a Supreme Court that rules hunger is optional is a Supreme Court that has forgotten justice. Thank you for listening to this special episode of the Informed American Podcast. Please stay informed. Please stay engaged. And remember, when a government can feed people and chooses not to, that isn't fiscal responsibility. It's betrayal.